There's some new intelligence that suggests Vladimir Putin is preparing to launch a powerful new offensive soon, and it could happen sometime in the next 10 days. It involves up to 500,000 new recruits and thousands of pieces of military equipment. President Putin is aiming to capture the entire Donbas region in eastern Ukraine and hopes to pull off this major victory by February 24th, which would be the one-year anniversary of his invasion of Ukraine. Joining us now live from Lviv, Ukraine with the latest is correspondent Jim Lechner. Good evening, Jim.
Well, good evening, John, from here in Kyiv, where we've had a relatively quiet week filled with harsh winter weather, but the clearing of the skies today brought a renewal of the Russian air attacks here. Beginning in the morning, we experienced 3 different air raid alarms, and then we could watch the contrails of missiles pass over the city as they impacted to the south, targeting the power infrastructure. Now, as you mentioned, the Russian offensive continues out in the eastern Donbas, and the Russians are experiencing significant success around the siege of Bakhmut. We've been reporting on that siege for months now, but the Russians are as close as they've ever been to cutting off the city. There's significant fighting going along the last 2 roads leading into the city. To illustrate this, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reported that Tuesday was the highest number of Russians killed in action in a single day, primarily there in the fighting around Bakhmut. There's a number of problems now for the Ukrainians with that offensive and that battle going on. They're having to pull in some of their best units in the military to fight in that city, and fight outnumbered, they're suffering heavy casualties. Also, as you mentioned, we are anticipating a significant renewal of the Russian offensive, with hundreds of thousands of troops being ready to be committed to that fight, in which the Russians are already gaining success. This is creating a race against time for the promised equipment from the West of tanks, long-range missiles, and hopefully fighter planes. It's not going to be just the delivery of that equipment, but the training of the troops and those units, and a race against time now to get them back and into the line to meet the Russian offensive that's going on, and then the commitment of these fresh troops. Back to you, John.
Jim, you know, we saw this last year. We saw massive amounts of Russian troops amassing on the border there, a force size larger than what we saw on the D-Day invasion from the Allies. Is there anything that indicates to you it will be different this time, considering the Russians had so much trouble when we were told last year they were going to be able to run all over eastern Ukraine?
Well, those are some great points. And one of the things we've looked at is there are more Russian troops that are going to be committed new and fresh to the fight than participated in the initial invasion. That's a significant number, at least 300,000, maybe as high as 500,000, as you said, with the initial invasion just being over 200,000. That's the first point. The second point is that the Russians were overconfident in their initial invasion. They expected Ukraine to fold within days. They're not overconfident now. They've learned some lessons. They're preparing themselves logistically, and so there's a significant threat. In addition to that, the lines are stretched thin here in Ukraine. Any push from the north would take away from the offensive which is going on in the south, and it would be very difficult for the Ukrainians to meet both an offensive from both directions. And so again, that equipment that's coming from the west and those trained units are going to be critical to this fight.
Jim Lechner for us live in Lviv, Ukraine. Jim, thank you. Well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday joined 27 European leaders, part of the European Union, for a summit in Brussels. It was his first visit to the EU since Putin's invasion of Ukraine. This was Zelensky's last stop after meetings earlier in London and in Paris. And joining us now for more insight on these meetings, former Moscow and Paris correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, Craig Copetas. Craig, great to have you back with us. You know, we do see Zelensky putting on a brave face when he was in Europe. We also just heard from Jim Lechner there, kind of the dark situation that Ukraine is facing right now. Give us your insights on, you know, what Zelensky is hoping to accomplish by being in Europe at this stage of the game, and what do you think the prospects are for the Ukrainian military, considering what we just heard there from Jim Lechner, potentially 500,000 Russian troops getting ready for this new offensive?
Well, Zelensky's most remarkable achievement during his trip to Europe is that he's cut through the ambiguity of what is evil. He has codified evil, he has indicted evil, and he is prosecuting evil with the blood of the Ukrainian people. And he has come here and to the United States to plead for more weapons in this fight. We haven't heard talk of evil in such eloquence. Evil, what is it? It's a question as old as humankind. But we haven't heard it discussed with such eloquence probably since Churchill. And it's important to understand it. He came to Europe and he embraced the politicians, but all of his speeches were directed to the people. One of his lines was, in fact, the defense of Europe depends on everyone, not just the politicians. Very powerful stuff, and it's resonated here quite strongly.
And that's really the point that I think has to get out. You know this as well as I do. There's an effort right now among House Republicans to stop aid to Ukraine. They call it the Ukraine Fatigue Act. Matt Gaetz and those leading the charge. But, you know, the future of Europe is at stake, and Zelensky's making that point right now. Also, it doesn't look like a lot of that military equipment is going to get to Ukraine in time for this offensive. Again, your thoughts, Craig, on what we expect to see maybe in the next 10 days in Ukraine.
Well, look, Jim is absolutely right. The equipment is not going to get there in time. You know, Putin operates with mischief, mayhem, and manipulation. This is what he does. And what he is counting on, beyond what's going on right now with the impending and further Russian troops coming in, is that the United States fails to recognize the cascade effect of this. You know, John, there's three things in life. It's kind of like from the American rule book. Never play cards with a man named Doc, never eat at a place called Mom's, and never trust a word that spills out of Vladimir Putin's mouth. And what Zelensky is trying to do here, because he knows he's not going to get this gear quick enough, he knows that. But what he's trying to do is rally the population to get behind this in the same way Churchill did, because for any American or European, no matter how comfortable they are, no matter what their politics are, if they believe that what Putin is doing is not going to hit the United States of America, well, I'm sorry to inform them that they're whistling past a graveyard, because this is what Putin does, and he will continue to do.
It's true. Some of the wishful thinking does sound a little bit like the isolationists of the 1930s. Great to see you, Craig. Thank you for your insights, as always. We appreciate it.
Thank you, John. See you soon.